Welcome back to Restoring Sean. Today we are in episode 25, where we take a look at the front yard and ultimately, finally, wrap up all of the work that went into this house. If you're new to the channel, I post a new video every Wednesday morning where I do some sort of a Jim Carrey birthing out of a rhino into all of the work that went into restoring my second house, the ranch. All opinions are my own. Never assume I have the correct answer. And did you know, the number one thing on my bucket list in life was to go to Sydney, Australia? I got to do so with my friend Jonathan 2 weeks before moving out of the ranch. We spent almost a full week in Sydney before taking part in a few festivities for World Pride, but also going to the Blue Mountains, Bondi Beach, the Harbor Bridge, and capping it all off with a sunset dinner cruise. It was the vacation of a lifetime with one of my favorite people, and it set me on the path out of Minnesota with a very, very light heart. Let's get started on the final episode of Restoring the Ranch. Outside the ranch was a tricky thing for me to wrap my head around because at a glance, the house was not in bad condition. The roof was newer, maybe 10 years old. The garage door was in great shape. The vinyl siding was in the same 10 to 15 year range as well, but in good shape too. The color of all that was just faded. There was the dumb semi-fence that hid the trash cans by the garage door, and the super dry and weathered railing at the front porch. So where do you go with all that? A color change is one thing, but for the rest, how do you landscape it? How do you pull the look together of a place to make it have any sort of wow factor when it's arranged sideways on a private street and no one is ever really walking past it? Well, you start with the mailbox. I'm not kidding, I started with the mailbox. That wasn't the plan, of course, but I wasn't going to be doing anything outside the house that first fall. I would get cracking in the spring after I'd had time to actually think about it, think about the questions that I just posed to you. One day I was outside and in the garage, finishing putting things away with the garage door shut. I heard someone pull into the driveway, back out, a crunching sound, and then tires peeling out. So I went to look, and they had backed into my mailbox, leaving it dead in the street. Now, to be fair, you could see in the image that the old mailbox was shit, rusted out, and it was shit. And really, it was probably ready to fall over from rot anyway. I would have replaced it in the spring, but that was now expedited. I went off to the store and bought a new one and this dumb kit for the post that was absolutely junk because it was just a couple of wood stakes that you pounded down and then slid this black plastic sleeve over. A year later, I put in an actual wood post with not a concrete base, but one of those cement foam bases, which was pretty cool because it's the chemical reaction that creates the solid base for it. And then I spray painted the post black and swapped the box I had purchased in the fall. Problem solved. It would be remiss not to mention that in the fall, I did also replace the house numbers, as clearly the old ones were foul, and I wanted the new ones to blend a bit better with that mid-century modern vibe that was taking hold, in social media and whatever. Beyond the massive task of replacing the mailbox, I had largely taken the winter to think about what needed to be changed or fixed on the outside of the house before moving forward with any painting projects. And first up was removing the total crap railing from the front stoop. This thing was not stable at all. Just putting your hand on it made it sway. I took it down and removed the metal anchor plates that held it to the bolts in the bricks and the ground. When my parents came out to deliver the kitchen island in the spring of 2021, my dad also brought an angle grinder so that these metal bolts could be cut away. When that was done, I'd be able to cover them with a bit of concrete patch, and then we were going to be in business. On that trip, my dad also used a Sawzall to cut off the bottom of the gate because over the years it had sagged to the point that you couldn't get it open without tearing into the grass. With that done, I was ready for my very first project, so take it away, younger, handsomer me.
All right, so the front of my house is a little bit rough. It's old and very faded. And step one of my projects this summer is to stain the brickwork. So I have my stain here, and I found out that you're actually not supposed to paint brick outside because in climates such as ours, you can have issues with the freeze and thaw and stuff like that. So we got stain, and I'm going to bring you all along the ride as I put the first bit on because I have no idea what to expect. But that's the best way to do it. So, let's see. Yep. It's black.
I really like this product. It has a really odd consistency of not being as thick as paint, but not as watery as stain. I didn't try rolling it on because I assumed it wouldn't really get into the pits and cracks of the brick, but I was fine using the brush and being outside doing so in the great weather. That was a perk. This is the same material I would use for all of the brick columns around the house, as well as the chimney out back. I mentioned last week that I didn't like the color of bricks very much, and because I'm also not much of a pattern person, making them a solid color was just what was gonna work for me. And I didn't feel bad about it either, so don't come for me as if I did some great injustice to the historical nature of this house. You cannot deny that this looked better. And now, with a new porch light as well installed to match the new lights I'd also installed flanking the garage door. You can see in this photo though how bad of shape the concrete was here, but that would not get fixed until the fall. After the brickwork was done, I shifted to getting some plants in the ground so that they would have time to mature a little bit by the end of summer. I wanted them to get some height as well. The front beds were just rock, and I've got, no issue with rock or really even this type of rock. But because they were in direct sunlight all day, the heat that radiated off the rocks just wasn't good. I purchased my Carl Forster tall grasses from an online nursery that had them really cheap and spaced them out here. I figured that the height of the grass against the front of the house would at least add some visual intrigue, this thought being continued on the other side of the front porch as well. It took a bit to move the rocks away and dig out the holes, but I got them planted and then planted alliums in between all of them, which would be shorter than the grass, about a third the height, with bright purpley pink flowers when they bloomed. Unfortunately, these never took off. I think the sunlight and the heat was just too much for them. But I did try. I put new planters up on the porch, these twin sort of modern looking ones that I found on Amazon that came as a set. I ended up leaving these behind when I moved, mostly because they didn't fit the vibe of my new house, but also because they were filled with frozen water and dirt and I didn't want to be an asshole and dump it out in the yard for the new owner to deal with. While we're on this photo, notice the paint on the gutters. It was peeling off and made the gutters look pretty terrible. My solution wasn't perfect, but it did help. I scraped off as much of the flaking paint as possible and then used a galvanized spray paint on all of the gutters in a gray shade. It was okay, but by the time I moved, it was sort of coming off too. The gutters were steel or something else that was not aluminum, and they were original to the house, so 50 years old. And really, at the end of the day, they just needed to be replaced. Once that part was done, I switched gears and started painting the fascia underneath the gutters in pure white by Sherwin-Williams. This was also the first line of attack for me in having a house with actual contrast. I went around the whole house doing this, then started painting the few amounts of trim work before I ran into a dilemma.
I am painting trim and stuff today, kinda. So like everything was this kind of ivory color. Question being, so I'm going to leave that that was blue and I'm going to leave that painted white, but should I paint these corner pieces on the house white as well? That's my current question, so let me know what you think.
I ended up leaving the corner pieces as they were. It was easier that way anyway. But you can already see when looking down the length of the house how the white was doing its job with contrast. Also, to note in this photo, all of the wood that hid the trash and recycling is gone, as I had removed that when the ground was no longer frozen and I put the cans inside the garage where they would stay going forward. Next, I painted the garage door itself using leftovers of the same paint I had used for the kitchen island, African Gray by Sherwin-Williams. It was rated for indoor and outdoor use, so don't wig out about that. I've never been a big fan of ivory or yellowy beige, and this color matched the gutter color pretty well, so I was thrilled. But also it was just fresh and clean, and there's nothing wrong with that. And when it was done, even without the siding painted, we were already on the right path to the ranch looking better. I also discovered that spring that almost directly across from my front door, a rabbit would have her babies in a little hole in the grass. This was a delight because they were adorable, but it was heartbreaking later when you could hear the bunnies at night and the neighborhood cats. I'll leave it at that. Those baby bunnies were there twice a summer for both summers that I lived there. Before painting the house itself, I moved to the fence to make sure I wouldn't have any overspray on the siding once that part was finished. So you've got the dry looking before, and then with some lovely iron ore by Sherwin-Williams, you've got the after. The thing I love about a dark fence is that everything pops in front of it. It's this awesome solid background to have. It's neutral and it doesn't really stick out. It just blends in with the surroundings and doesn't act as like an eye catcher, for lack of a better term. Then the big question arose and I turned to Instagram for the answer. What color do I paint the house? The choices were Stillwater, Thunderous, and Riverway. the latter of which I had used in the office back at the manor. The winner was Stillwater, partly from it being the crowd favorite, but also because I wanted that contrast, and the other two I felt weren't going to get me there. Most companies sell vinyl safe paint, in case you didn't know, but the catch is that you can't get every single color in it. Luckily, Stillwater, which was not listed in Sherwin-Williams vinyl safe colors, there was a vinyl safe formula for that color that I could use. And that vinyl safe formula means that it did not have any black ink in it. If it has black ink and you put it on vinyl siding, the sunlight will heat those black components up and it'll warp your siding. This is also why you can't paint your window frames on the outside with just black, because as they warp, it'll shatter your glass, or at least break the seal for the gas that's in between your panes of glass. So don't do that. So for vinyl safe colors, instead of black ink, they replace it with blue. So if you want to use a color like, I don't know, let's say iron ore, for example, the vinyl safe version of that is not going to look like iron ore because it'll have so much blue in it. It'll take on a whole different story. Painting at the manor had been just fine because I was painting wood and cement board siding. Here, I was admittedly nervous about painting over the vinyl because I had never done so. And absolute worst case scenario would be once the temperatures dipped below zero, the paint would literally start peeling off of the siding. Thankfully, that didn't happen. And with how the paint held up over the 2 summers and 2 winters that I lived there, I was sold on the reality of what it could do. Because look at this change. I started with the garage most visible from the road, and it completely looked like it was brand new siding. Don't even try to disagree. From there, I started moving around the front of the house. I had to cut everything in with a brush at the top and then down the corner pieces because I would be using my paint sprayer for the bulk of the work and wanted to make sure I had a little bit of space between the spray, the plastic paint shield I had purchased, and whatever surfaces I was trying to keep clear of the new color.
I got this front all done, and then I'm currently edging in that and starting on the front. And then I just got that bitch out because I needed to clear away from the house so that I can hose the house off and not be painting over dirt and grass tomorrow. So that's the thrill of my day. I'm starting to get a little crispy, but it's all part of the process. Apparently, there's a sudden rainstorm coming, so I'm a little like trying to finish what I'm doing.
That sudden rainstorm didn't actually amount to anything, and by the time the sun was getting ready to set, I had finished painting the entire front of the ranch. Look at that beauty and the trickery a new paint job can achieve. That house, just like my current house, unless you get up close and personal to look, you cannot tell the siding is old. I took a short break from painting the rest of the house to focus instead on landscaping the front yard. A new color was one thing, but the landscaping was quite another. The beds along the front of the house had these little rounded concrete edge pieces, which you've probably seen a million times in your life, so I took them all out, as well as some that were just hanging out in a stack in the backyard. I had enough to lay out an actual border in the front yard, so I started by creating that line and then digging out the dirt necessary to have them all partly submerged, doing a much better job at this than I had with the plastic garden edging at the manor, mostly because I learned from the past. Then I was off to Menards for mulch. You know, I only had Bridget the truck for a year and a half, and I really didn't get the use out of her that I thought I would, but for something like picking up mulch, she was a babe. With the mulch laid out, I added in some solar-powered spotlights I had gotten from Amazon a couple of years earlier, and when nighttime came, the ranch was suddenly alive. It looked inviting, and I'm going to use the term perky. She was the new girl on the block, only she wasn't the new girl. She was the same old frump, but with a nose job and better hair. I purchased some plants to extend around by the garage, one being a forsythia, I believe, and then some blue fescue grasses, which the bunnies demolished and I did not replace. But I couldn't be mad at them, I just wanted to pick them up and keep them forever. That summer of 2021, my roommate Andrew helped out in the yard and tore out the beast unruly rose bush that was growing in the front planter. He leveled it down to nothing, as you can see here, and though there was no after picture, I planted a tree there instead and framed it with some of those concrete border pieces as well. In the fall, I planted mums in the planter on the front porch and then started patching the concrete. I used sort of a skim coat to cover all of that pitted stone, smoothing it out and making it look just a bit nicer. Then I bought that same brand of concrete concrete stain, but in a gray color that matched the garage door and newly painted storm door. It was all a bit blue for my liking when finished, but it was still an improvement. Not much else happened that year though, and the following year, I replaced the blue fescue grass with a taller purple elephant type grass. No idea what it was called, but damn, did it take off well. The Carl Forster grass also took off really great, filling out just as I had hoped it would. I repainted the storm door just white, and that helped to calm down the blue tones that were going on up front as well. The final winter came and dumped copious amounts of snow that just never seemed to let up. With the driveway being wide enough for 5 cars and me not having a snowblower, it was always a tedious and daunting task to take care of the snow. Especially my first winter when I had a stent in my stomach for the kidney stones and the snow was relentless. In subsequent years, roommates always helped when they were around, and it went a lot quicker with 2 people than just me, but it was still a life suck.
Ooh. Come on, Paul Bunyan. With the snow realness.
Get your lumbering ass out here.
I think you look so good doing it. Look at you.
No, don't.
Oh, come on. Oh, get that snow. Get that snow, Daddy.
In early February, the ranch was officially on the market, and seeing the sale sign in the front yard was enough excitement for me to finally start breathing easily. The listing photos, while taken freshly after a big snowstorm that had already started melting, still showed a house that looked like it had promise. Whether or not it did, I don't know, because I was getting the hell out of Dodge, but the house looked cute, and it looked still, and for the right person, it looked like home. The ranch had its first showing at 9 a.m. on a Thursday morning, and by 8 p.m. that evening, the first offer was in. By the end of the weekend, I believe I had 7 offers, and then that Sunday night, I selected the new owner. And that is all I've got right now. Thank you so much for watching today as we finished looking at and exploring all of the projects that went into restoring the ranch. If you have questions or comments on anything you saw today, please feel free to drop them in the comments below. Go ahead and click the like button while you're at it, and subscribe if you haven't already. That way you'll be reminded every Wednesday morning when a new episode drops, like next week when we strike the final chord of Season 2 in Lessons from the Ranch. Until then, take care, and I will see you soon.